Hello, my dear friends. You are standing on a narrow path, high in the Andes Mountains. The air is so thin it feels like a ghost in your lungs, cold and sharp with every breath. The sun, a brilliant, merciless disk in the deep blue sky, feels both hot on your skin and utterly incapable of warming the biting wind. All around you, jagged peaks soar at the heavens, their stony grey faces dusted with snow. It's a landscape of breathtaking, brutal beauty. A place where, let's be honest, the view is spectacular, but you probably wouldn't survive the night without a very specific and very ancient set of skills. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps more than you know. Now, picture yourself there on that precipice. Pull a thick, woolen blanket around your shoulders. Feel the immense silence, broken only by the whisper of the wind over rock. This is the stage for our story tonight. This is the world, the Inca. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're here to answer a seemingly simple question, a question that probably brought you here tonight. Did the Inca really use llamas for a postal service? It conjures such a charming image, doesn't it? You can almost see it. A fluffy, slightly aloof llama with a colourful woven bag strapped to its back, trotting dutifully along a mountain path, carrying a vital message for the emperor. Perhaps the message is a finely painted piece of hide, or a delicate decree written on a specially prepared leaf. It's a lovely, almost whimsical, picture. An ancient FedEx, powered by stubborn, long-lashed camelids. This is the glamorous illusion, the neat and tidy postcard from the past that we like to imagine. It's simple, it's adorable, and it's almost completely wrong. The real story, as always, is so much stranger, and so much more interesting. And it begins not with a letter, but with a secret. The first secret you need to understand is that the Inca had no system of writing. Not a single letter. No alphabet, no hieroglyphs, no ink-stained scribes labouring over scrolls. The entire concept of a written message, as we know it, simply did not exist in their world. So, what was in that llama's postal bag? Nothing. Because there was no bag, and there was no letter. The message was something else entirely. Imagine, held out in front of you, is the real Inca mail. It's not a flat piece of parchment. It's a bundle of strings. At the top is a thick, primary cord, and hanging from it are dozens, maybe hundreds, of thinner, coloured strings, like a strange, fibrous jellyfish. And these strings are covered in knots. Tiny knots, big knots, knots tied in different directions, at different heights. This is a quipu. And this is where our cozy, romantic image begins to unravel. Lean in closer. This isn't a clean, museum piece quipu hanging behind glass. This is a working tool. The first thing you notice is the feel of it. The strings, spun from llama or alpaca wool, are greasy. They are slick with lanolin, the natural oil in the wool that keeps the animals warm and dry. But there's another kind of grease too, subtle grime from human hands, from months or years of being held, handled, and transported across the empire. It's not dirty in a repulsive way, but in an intimate, lived-in way. It feels less like an object and more like a part of someone. Now, bring it closer and notice the smell. It doesn't smell like old paper or ink. It smells of earth. It smells of damp wool, of animal, of the faintest hint of wood smoke from a high-altitude campfire. It smells of sweat and toil. This greasy, smelly, knotted bundle of yarn is the pinnacle of Inca data management. It's their hard drive, their spreadsheet, their census report, and their calendar, all rolled into one. The colours of the strings might represent different things: yellow for gold, red for soldiers, white for peace. The types of knots and their position on the string represent numbers in a decimal system, tens, hundreds, thousands. This is the shocking reality that replaces our llama post illusion. The Inca Empire wasn't run on words, but on numbers. It wasn't poetry they were sending across the mountains. It was inventory reports. A quipu might say the northern province has a surplus of 2057 potatoes, the coastal province has a deficit of 300 fish, and the local garrison has 58 new soldiers, of which 12 are currently ill. It was a system of absolute control, of meticulous accounting that allowed a central government in the capital city of Cusco to know with shocking precision exactly what was happening in every corner of its vast, sprawling territory. They didn't need to write, "We need more corn," because this greasy tangle of knots showed it in cold, hard, quantifiable terms. Their entire worldview was built around this. Order, balance, and reciprocity were the pillars of their cosmos, and the quipu was the physical manifestation of that order. It wasn't a lesser system than writing. It was a system perfectly tailored to their needs and their philosophy. It was tactile, three-dimensional information. You could feel the numbers, trace the data with your fingers. It was a language of texture and structure, not of abstract symbols on a page. And this strange, greasy bundle of knots is the letter, the real message that needed to be delivered with breathtaking speed and accuracy. But to understand how it travelled, you have to understand the road it was carried on. A road that was, in its own way, just as much of a marvel as the message itself. That greasy, knotted quipu, humming with silent data, needed to travel. And to travel at the speed of thought, it required a system of infrastructure that was, in its own way, as breathtakingly ambitious as the empire itself. This was the Crapacan, the great Inca road, the Royal Road. And when you hear that name, the glamorous illusion that springs to mind is one of imperial grandeur. You imagine a wide, paved highway, a marvel of engineering cutting a smooth, stately path through the formidable mountains. You picture something like a Roman road, a testament to power, so straight and perfect that armies could march abreast, their sandals slapping rhythmically on polished stone. It's a vision of order imposed upon a chaotic landscape, a golden thread stitching the empire together, stretching over 25,000 miles from modern-day Colombia to Chile. A road fit for a god-king. Now, let's leave that pristine image behind and step onto the real Crapacan. You are on the road itself. The first thing you realize is that it is not wide. In many places, it's barely a path, a few feet across, hugging a cliffside with a terrifyingly sheer drop just one misstep away. The second thing you realize is that it is not smooth at all. There is no pavement, no cobblestone, no sense of a level, engineered surface designed for a comfortable journey. Instead, your feet find packed earth, sharp gravel, and in many places, just the raw, uneven bedrock of the mountain itself, carved out by hand. And then come the stairs. Oh, the stairs. The most shocking reality of the Royal Road is that it wasn't a road in our sense of the word. It was, for huge stretches, a staircase. A relentless, brutal, soul-crushing staircase climbing directly up the face of a mountain. The Inca had no wheeled vehicles. No carts. No chariots. Their entire world was moved by foot and by hoof. And if you are on foot, the most efficient way to ascend a 45-degree slope is not a long, winding switchback, but a straight, vertical flight of stone steps. So you climb, one step, then another, then 1,000 more. Your calves burn. Your lungs, already struggling in the thin air, feel like they're on fire. This glorious highway is, in reality, the world's most grueling stairmaster. And as you climb, you become aware of the smell. Remember the earthy, animal scent of the quipu? That was just a prelude. The road itself has a powerful, organic aroma. Because this path, this vital artery of the empire, was also a toilet. It was the primary route for thousands of people and tens of thousands of llamas. And where there are llamas, there is llamadom. Not just a stray dropping here and there. Piles of it. The small, pebbly pellets were everywhere, a constant feature of the landscape underfoot. Fresh, steaming piles from a caravan that passed this morning. Old, dried piles, bleached by the sun, waiting to be collected by locals for whom it was a precious fuel source for their fires. The air, for all its high-altitude purity, carries the constant, pungent, barnyard smell of animal waste. It clings to the rocks, the dust, your clothes. The Great Inca Road, this masterpiece of imperial engineering, was in practice a long, narrow, high-altitude sewer, a corridor of excrement. Why would a civilization capable of such incredible feats of stonework and social organization build a road like this? Because their definition of perfect was entirely different from ours. The road wasn't built for comfort, it was built for speed and control. The state, the saber Inca in his golden capital, needed one thing above all: information. He needed that greasy quippy to get from point to point as fast as humanly possible. A straight line up a mountain, via a staircase, is infinitely faster for a runner than a gentle, winding path. The road's design was a ruthless calculation of efficiency. Who cares if your legs burn? Who cares about the smell? The only thing that mattered was the integrity of the state. Furthermore, the lack of sanitation wasn't a sign of primitivism, it was a reflection of their relationship with the world. Llama dung wasn't filth, it was fuel. It was fertilizer. It was a resource. Human waste was simply left for Pachamama, the Earth Mother, to reclaim. Modern concept of sealing ourselves off from our own biological realities was entirely alien to them. The road, in all its gritty, smelly, exhausting reality, was a perfectly designed tool for its purpose to move state-sanctioned people, goods and data across an impossible landscape as directly as a bird flies. It was a tool, not a luxury. And this magnificent, filthy, exhausting road was just the stage. The system required a star performer, a very specific kind of person, bred for this very environment, to make the whole thing work. The road, after all, cannot run itself. It needs a runner. Now that you have felt the brutal reality of the road beneath your feet and smelled its pungent, organic truth, it's time to meet the person who conquered it. The glamorous illusion of the Inca messaging system centers on the chasqua. The word itself sounds electric, like a whisper of wind. History paints him as a heroic figure, an Olympic athlete of the ancient world. You imagine a noble runner, his bronze skin gleaming, a colorful feathered headband holding back his long, black hair. In this vision, he flies across the mountains, his lungs perfectly adapted to the thin air, his legs tireless, his spirit indomitable. He is the human hummingbird, a near-mythical figure who can outrun a Spanish horse, a symbol of the Inca people's harmony with their punishing environment. He is a superhero in a loincloth, the glorious embodiment of imperial speed and efficiency. But let's stop and wait by the side of this high-altitude path for a real chasqui to appear. Let him get closer. The man who trots into view is not a towering, godlike athlete. He is small, compact, and wiry. His glamour is entirely functional. His face is weathered, the skin leathery and cracked from relentless exposure to the sun and wind. His eyes are narrowed against the glare, set in a web of deep wrinkles that speak of squinting into the horizon for his entire life. He's probably young, maybe not even 20, but he looks older. His body is a machine of pure efficiency, stripped of every ounce of non-essential fat. His legs are not the bulging, sculpted muscles of a modern sprinter. They are lean, sinewy and corded, like tightly wound rope. And then you notice the details, the shocking reality of what it took to be this human machine. Look at his feet. They are not clad in finely crafted sandals. They are bare. Or, at best, wrapped in simple woven grass or leather sandals that offer minimal protection. His soles are a thick, calloused, greyish mass of flesh, fissured with deep cracks. They are more like hooves than human feet, pounded into this shape by thousands upon thousands of miles on the jagged stones and gravel of the Capacan. You can see old cuts, new cuts, and a permanent layer of grime worked deep into the calluses. This isn't the foot of a hero. It's the foot of a beast of burden. And now, look at his mouth. As he runs, he chews. A word of something is tucked into his cheek, and a thin trickle of greenish saliva occasionally runs from the corner of his mouth. This is his fuel, the sacred coca leaf, which we will explore more later, but for now, see it for what it is, a constant, messy part of his being. The chewing has stained his teeth and gums. His breath, when he passes, is not the clean air of the mountains, but a strange, green, vegetal smell mixed with the sour scent of exertion. And the exertion is immense. He is not running gracefully. He is in a state of controlled agony. His breathing is a harsh, rhythmic rasp. A film of sweat and dust coats his skin, streaking through the dirt on his body. The glamorous illusion is of effortless flight. The reality is a young man, barely out of his teens, systematically destroying his own body in a desperate, high-stakes relay race against time. Why would anyone do this? What logic could possibly justify this level of physical torment? The why is rooted in the Inca concept of mita, This was not a job in the modern sense. A chasque wasn't a volunteer, nor was he paid a wage. He was fulfilling his labor tax to the state. Every able-bodied man in the empire owed a certain amount of his time to public works, building roads, farming on state land, serving in the army, or, if you were young, fast, and from a trusted family, running as a chasque. It was an honor, yes, but it was an obligatory honor. It was his sacred duty. To refuse was not an option. It would be to defy the Inca, who was a god, and to fail the community that had raised you. Your life was not entirely your own. It belonged in part to the Elu, your family group, and to the empire itself. The chasque's suffering was not seen as cruelty. It was a necessary sacrifice for the good of the whole. His burned lungs, his shattered feet, his exhausted body, these were all offerings to the collective. The empire's survival depended on the rapid flow of information encoded in that greasy quipu he carries, and his personal comfort was utterly irrelevant in the face of that need. He was a human cog in a vast, impersonal machine. His identity was subsumed by his function. He was not a man named Cusi or Tupac. He was, simply, the chasque, and he was running not just to deliver data, but to deliver it to the next link in the chain. But what of the creature we all came here to see? The famous llama. Surely, this noble animal must play a part in this grueling postal system. Let's shift our focus from the exhausted human runner to his supposed companion, the star of our show, the llama. When you think of the Inca and their mail, the glamorous illusion is right there in the title of so many articles and documentaries, the Llama Express. You picture it immediately, a single, majestic llama, a proud and intelligent creature, specially bred for this noble task. It has a fluffy white coat, perhaps a decorative tassel on its ear, and an intelligent, almost knowing look in its large, dark eyes. In this fantasy, the llama is a willing partner to the chasque, his loyal and sure-footed friend, carrying the precious quipu in a specially designed pouch, trotting along as a sort of ancient, four-legged sidecar. It's a partnership of man and beast, working in perfect harmony, a testament to the Inca's deep connection with the natural world. This image is powerful. It's on souvenirs, in children's books, and it's what we want to believe. Now, let's bring a real Inca llama into focus. Not a modern, tourist-friendly llama from a petting zoo, but a working animal from the 15th century. The first thing you notice is that it is not particularly majestic. It's smaller than you might think, a bit scruffy, and its coat is a practical, mottled brown or black, not a pristine white. It has a perpetually unimpressed, slightly grumpy expression, and its primary feature, the one that shatters the illusion of a noble partnership, is its spit. This isn't just a little bit of drool. The shocking reality of a llama is its ability to project a stream of vile, green, foul-smelling liquid with surprising accuracy and force. This liquid is not just saliva. It's regurgitated stomach contents, a steaming, semi-digested slurry of grass and whatever else it has been eating, mixed with gastric juices. And a working llama, especially one being pushed along a difficult path, is not a happy, placid creature. It is cantankerous, stubborn, and quick to show its displeasure. Get too close, try to adjust its load, or push it too hard, and you are likely to receive a face full of its warm, stinking cud. The air around a group of llamas is not filled with the serene energy of the mountains, but with the constant threat of being gobbed on by a disgruntled camelid. Imagine the chasque already at the limits of his endurance, having to deal with an animal that might, at any moment, turn and cover him in a shower of acidic vomit. So why, you have to ask, would the Inca revere this creature? Why was it so central to their world if it was so unpleasant? The why lies in understanding the llama's true role. It was not a pet. It was not a noble steed. It was livestock. It was a walking toolkit, a masterpiece of biological engineering perfectly suited to the Andes. The Inca worldview was profoundly practical. They didn't need the llama to be friendly. They needed it to be useful. And it was useful in ways that are hard for us to comprehend. Its wool, coarse and greasy with lanolin, was spun into the rope for their bridges, the sacks for their cargo, and the very strings of the quipu. Its dung, those endless pellets on the capacan, was the primary source of fuel in a high-altitude world with few trees. It was dried and burned for cooking and for warmth. Its meat was a vital source of protein, often dried into jerky called charque, the origin of our word that could be stored for years. And most importantly, it could carry a load. Not a heavy load, maybe 50 to 75 pounds, but it could carry it over terrain where no other beast of burden could survive. It could browse on tough mountain grasses, go for days with little water, and handle the altitude without a problem. The Inca's relationship with the llama wasn't about affection. It was about deep, unsentimental respect for its utility. It was their equivalent of the tractor, the pickup truck, and the power generator, all rolled into one grumpy, spitting package. They didn't need it to carry a single, lightweight quipu for the postal service. The human runner was infinitely faster and more reliable for that specific task. The idea of saddling a valuable, multi-purpose animal with a message a man could carry is, from a practical Inca perspective, absurd. It would be like using a cargo ship to deliver a single letter. So, if the Chaskai ran alone, and the llama wasn't his postal partner, where did the runner rest? He couldn't possibly run forever. He must have had shelters along the way, places to recover before the next leg of his brutal journey. After the grueling ordeal on the road, our exhausted Chaskai needs a place to rest. The glamorous illusion presents us with the Tambo, the Inca roadside inn. You imagine a charming, rustic shelter, a cozy haven against the mountain chill. In this idealized picture, the Tambo is a well-maintained stone building with a warm, crackling fire in the center. A friendly keeper greets the incoming runner with a bowl of hot stew and a cup of chicha, the fermented corn beer. There's a clean bed of soft alpaca wool blankets waiting for him, a place where he can rest his battered feet and recover his strength before the next runner arrives to take the quipu. It's a vision of state-sponsored hospitality, a network of welcoming rest stops that underscores the empire's care for its vital messengers. Now let's follow our real Chaskai, his feet raw, his body aching as he stumbles towards an actual tambo. The structure that comes into view is not a cozy inn, it is a cold, stark, brutally functional stone box. It's small, maybe just a single room, built from rough, unmortared field stones. There is no door, just an opening. There are no windows. Smoke from a long dead fire has blackened the stones of the ceiling. The air inside is cold, damp, and smells of old smoke, mildew, and the lingering scent of unwashed bodies. This is the shocking reality. The Tambo was less of an inn and more of a human kennel. There is no friendly keeper. These smaller relay stations, known as Chascoasis, were often unmanned. They were simply shelters, positioned roughly every few miles the distance one Chaskai was expected to run at top speed. There is no bed with soft blankets. The floor is packed earth or stone. If he's lucky, there might be some old, dry grass scattered in a corner. The warm meal is whatever he carried with him, a handful of toasted corn kernels, some dried potato, or the coca leaves he continues to chew. He might find a clay, pot with some stagnant water left by the previous runner. It is a place of profound, lonely austerity. Its only purpose is to provide the most minimal shelter from the wind and rain while he waits, his nerves on edge, listening for the sound of the approaching runner he is meant to relieve. And it wasn't just Spartan. It could be filthy. Remember the lack of sanitation on the road? It didn't magically improve indoors. Waste would be disposed of just outside the doorway. The floor could be littered with the refuse of a dozen previous occupants' gnawed corn cobs, discarded food scraps, and other leavings. There was no concept of housekeeping, no staff to tidy up. It was a functional, disposable space, used and abandoned in a continuous cycle. The glamour of a state-run hospitality network dissolves into the grim reality of a series of cold, dirty, lonely stone huts designed not for comfort, but to ensure the Chaskai didn't freeze to death while waiting for his turn to run. So, why was it like this? Why would an empire that could build Machu Picchu provide such squalid accommodations for its most vital employees? The logic, again, is rooted in the Incas' unsentimental pragmatism and their concept of the state. The Tambo network wasn't about comfort, it was about efficiency. There were larger, more substantial tambos at greater intervals, true administrative centers that could house armies and store vast quantities of goods. But these little Chascoasis were different. Their sole function was to facilitate the relay. The Chaskai wasn't a guest, he was a component. The empire didn't need him to be comfortable. It needed him to be ready. It needed him to survive his 2-mile run and his brief wait, nothing more. This system was also a reflection of the Chaskai's life. These runners were not travelers on a long journey. They were locals, serving their mita labor tax in shifts, running back and forth along a single, familiar stretch of the road near their home village. The Chaskwezi wasn't a distant hotel. It was a temporary workstation. He would run his leg, pass the Quipu, and then likely return to his village, or wait to run back in the other direction. The state provided the absolute minimum necessary for the system to function. A roof, 4 walls, and nothing else. Because to the Inca state, luxury was a distraction. Comfort bred weakness. The system required hardship and vigilance. And to endure that hardship, to push his body past the normal limits of pain and exhaustion, the Chaskai relied on a special, divine substance he kept tucked in his cheek. The sacred leaf that fueled the entire network. To understand how the Chaskai could possibly endure the brutal stares of the Kapakan and the lonely squalor of the Tambo, we must look inside his mouth. The glamorous illusion surrounding his power source is that of a sacred ritual. We imagine the chewing of the coca leaf as a deeply spiritual act. The Chaskai, perhaps at dawn, facing the sacred mountain peaks, performs a solemn ceremony. He offers the first perfect leaves to the sun god, Inte, and the earth mother, Pachamama. He whispers a prayer for strength and guidance. The coca is a divine gift, a sacrament that connects him to the gods and unlocks a hidden, near-supernatural endurance. It doesn't just numb the pain, it elevates his spirit, making him more than human, a true messenger of the heavens. Now, let's watch the real Chaskai prepare his fuel. There is no elaborate ceremony. This is a routine, a necessity as mundane as tying his sandals. He pulls out a small, woven bag called a chuspa. It's a practical, well-worn pouch, not a sacred reliquary. Inside are the coca leaves. They are not perfect, glossy specimens. They are dried, broken, and crumpled, mixed with dust and bits of twig. He stuffs a thick wad of these brittle leaves into his cheek. Then, from another small container, often a little gourd, he takes a stick. He licks the end of the stick, dips it into a fine, white powder, and then sticks it into the wad of coca in his mouth. He repeats this several times. This is the shocking reality. The sacred coca leaf doesn't work on its own. To release its active alkaloids, it needs a catalyst, an alkaline substance to change the fin the mouth. But white powder is the secret ingredient. And that powder is coal, or powdered lime. It's made by burning limestone, seashells, or the stalks of quinoa plants to create a caustic ash. So what our heroic runner is doing is stuffing his mouth with dried leaves and a highly corrosive powder. The lime is what makes the whole thing work, but it's also what does the damage. This caustic substance burns. Imagine holding a pinch of powdered bleach or cement mix in your mouth for hours on end. It irritates the gums, eats away at tooth enamel, and leaves the inside of the mouth raw and sore. The divine energy is, in reality, a crude chemical reaction. The coca alkaloids, released by the lime, act as a mild stimulant. They constrict blood vessels, raise the heart rate, and suppress hunger, thirst, and fatigue. It's a low-grade amphetamine. It doesn't give him supernatural strength. It tricks his body into ignoring its own warning signals. He doesn't feel the pain in his ruined feet or the screaming protest of his lungs because the signals are being chemically blocked. He is not running on divine power. He is running on a drug that allows him to push his body far beyond its safe limits, effectively doing long-term damage to his organs and his teeth for the sake of short-term performance. The green trickle of saliva you saw earlier wasn't a sign of spiritual communion. It was the byproduct of a mouth being slowly burned by a chemical catalyst, mixed with leaf debris. So why was this practice not just accepted, but revered? The why is that the Inca didn't separate the chemical from the divine. For them, the physical effect was the proof of the sacred. The fact that this leaf, when combined with this ash, could grant such endurance was a sign of its divine origin. It was a gift from the gods, precisely because it worked. Coca was deeply woven into the fabric of their society. It was used in every religious ceremony. It was a diplomatic gift. It was a currency. And it was a medicine. But its use was also strictly controlled. Not just anyone could chew coca all day. Its distribution was managed by the state. Giving it to the chasquis, the miners, and the soldiers was a practical decision, a way to maximize the output of the state's labor force. The coca leaf allowed the empire to function. It enabled men to work at altitudes and levels of exertion that would otherwise be impossible. The state saw the Chasquai's burned mouth and dulled senses not as a tragedy, but as a small price to pay for an empire that could communicate across thousands of miles of impossible terrain. The runner's personal health was secondary to the health of the state. He was consuming a sacred gift to perform his sacred duty. The pain was part of the sacrifice. And this sacrifice was necessary to cross some of the most terrifying and ingenious parts of the royal road, the parts that didn't go over the mountains, but flew over the chasms between them. After chewing his coca and lime into a stimulating paste, the Chasquai continues his relentless journey. He comes to a place where the mountain path simply ends, cleaved in two by a deep, raging river gorge hundreds of feet below. This is where we encounter one of the most iconic marvels of Inca engineering, the suspension bridge. The glamorous illusion is one of elegant, ethereal beauty. You picture a delicate, golden bridge, woven from fine vines, swaying gently in the breeze. It looks like something from a fantasy novel, a structure so light and airy it seems almost to float over the chasm. It's a testament to the Incas' harmony with nature, using natural materials to create a structure of impossible grace and strength. Crossing it seems like a poetic, almost spiritual experience. Now, take a step onto the real bridge. The first thing that hits you is not its beauty, but its terrifying reality. The bridge is not a flat, stable walkway. It sags deeply in the middle, forming a steep U shape. To cross, you must first scramble down the sagging entrance, and then haul yourself up the other side. The main cables you are holding onto are not fine vines, they are thick, hairy ropes, as thick as your thigh, woven from thousands of blades of tuffetu grass. They are rough and prickly, and your hands instinctively recoil. These main cables form both the handrails and the floor supports. Laid across them are thin sticks, and over these sticks is a mat of more woven grass. That is the floor. It is full of gaps. You can see the river, a white, frothing ribbon of death, directly beneath your feet through the holes. This is the shocking reality. The bridge is alive. It sways. It bounces, it writhes with every step you take and every gust of wind. It is not a rigid structure, it is a flexible, organic creature, and crossing it is a nauseating, terrifying ordeal. The constant movement makes you feel seasick. The wind howls up from the gorge, trying to rip you from your precarious footing. The bridge groans and creaks, the ropes straining against the stone anchorages on either side. You are acutely aware that the only thing separating you from a fatal fall is a bundle of dried grass. And then, there's the smell. Remember the barnyard scent of the Capacan? It's here, too. The grass fibers of the bridge are a perfect trap for dust, dirt, and of course the inevitable llama dung from the cargo caravans that also used these bridges. But there's a new smell here, the scent of decay. These bridges were made entirely of organic material. They were constantly rotting. The damp air from the river below accelerated the process. The bridge you are on is in a perpetual state of decomposition. You can smell the sweet, musty odor of wet, composting grass. It's the smell of something slowly, inexorably falling apart. So why build something so terrifying and seemingly fragile? Why not build a sturdy stone bridge? The why is threefold. First, the Inca lacked the technology to build stone arches that could span such wide, deep gorges. The keystone arch, a staple of Roman engineering, was unknown to them. Second, in this earthquake-prone region, a flexible grass bridge was actually far more resilient than a rigid stone one. It could sway and absorb the shock of a tremor that would shatter a stone structure. But most importantly, the bridge's constant decay was part of the design. Its maintenance was a profound social ritual. Every year or two, the old, rotting bridge would be cut down and allowed to fall into the river below. Then, the local communities on either side would come together for a festival of renewal. The women would spend weeks twisting millions of grass blades into small cords, which the men would then weave into the massive new cables. Over several days, in a joyous, collaborative effort, they would haul the new cables across the gorge and assemble the new bridge. This act of rebuilding was their mita, their labor tax. It reinforced community bonds, reaffirmed their loyalty to the empire, and was a powerful religious ceremony celebrating the cycle of death and rebirth. The bridge's terrifying nature was a feature, not a bug. It was a constant, visceral reminder of the power of the community and the ingenuity of the state. Its temporary nature ensured that the skills to build it were never lost and that the social contract was constantly renewed. The Chasquai, running across this swaying, rotting, terrifying marvel, was not just crossing a river, he was running on a physical manifestation of his people's collective will. A will that was all directed towards serving the ultimate power in the land, the divine emperor in his golden palace. The Quipu, that greasy bundle of data, has now travelled hundreds of miles. It has been carried by a series of exhausted Chasquis, along a dung-strewn road, over a swaying bridge of grass. Its journey is nearing its end in the imperial capital of Cusco, the navel of the world. Its final destination is the court of the Saper Inca, the emperor, the only Inca. And the glamorous illusion of this figure is one of pure, divine perfection. We imagine a god-king, draped in shivering textiles woven from hummingbird feathers and bat fur, adorned with massive gold ear spools that stretch his lobes to his shoulders. He sits on a solid gold throne in a palace whose walls are sheathed in plates of polished gold, a sweat of the sun. His presence is so sacred, so powerful, that no one can look him in the eye. He is the pinnacle of civilization, a being of unimaginable wealth, power, and ritual purity. Now, let's pull back the golden curtain. The Saper Inca is indeed surrounded by unimaginable luxury. The gold is real. The textiles are finer than anything made in Europe at the time. His power is absolute. But this obsession with purity and divinity created a shocking reality that is profoundly human and rather disgusting. The Saper Inca was considered so divine that anything he touched became a sacred object, a huaca. This included not just his clothes and his golden plates, but everything that came from his body. Every hair that fell from his head, every fingernail clipping, every scrap of leftover food, and yes, even his own spit and excrement. This is the hidden truth of the palace. A team of female attendants had one of the strangest jobs in history, to collect everything the Saper Inca produced. When he ate, he would spit leftover food or bones not onto the floor, but into the cupped hand of a high-ranking attendant. This spittle and food mixture was then carefully stored in a special chest. If he needed to relieve himself, he did so into a golden pot, and the contents were sealed away. Because these things contained his essence. In the wrong hands, a rival could use them in a witchcraft ceremony to harm him. So everything, absolutely everything, had to be gathered, guarded, and eventually, ceremonially burned each day. Imagine the atmosphere in this golden palace. For all its shimmering beauty, for all the scent of fine incense, there is an underlying, hidden reality. Somewhere in a back room, chests are filled with the emperor's bodily waste, awaiting their ritual destruction. The attendants who handle these sacred leavings are performing a task of immense honor and immense revulsion. They are the guardians of the divine garbage. The illusion is one of sterile, untouchable splendor. The reality is a system obsessed with the careful management of bodily fluids and waste, a palace that is, in its own way, as focused on excrement as the open-air sewer of the Capacan. The Saper Inca, in his quest to be more than human, became a prisoner of his own biology, his every natural function turned into a matter of state security and religious protocol. The why behind this bizarre practice is central to understanding Inca power. The Saper Inca's divinity was not just a belief, it was the central pillar of the entire empire. His body was the physical vessel of the sun god on earth. Therefore, his physical integrity was paramount to the cosmic order. Any threat to his body was a threat to the harvest, the weather, and the stability of the state. This wasn't just paranoia, it was political theology. Controlling his physical outputs was as important as controlling the army. It was a logical, if extreme, extension of the belief that he was not a man, but a god temporarily inhabiting a human form. This obsession also created a fascinating paradox. The Saper Inca lived in a bubble of almost complete sterility. He never wore the same clothes twice. Once worn, they were burned. He ate from gold and silver, plates that were used only once. And yet, he was surrounded by the constant, ritualized collection of his own filth. It was a world of golden splendor built upon a foundation of biological anxiety. He was a god who could not even spit without a political and religious consequence. And it was to this divine, waste-obsessed figure that the knotted Quipu was finally presented. Not as a letter to be read, but as a report to be interpreted by a specialist who understood its strange, tactile language. The quipu has arrived. It has survived the journey and is now within the golden heart of Cusco. The Chasque who ran the final leg hands it over, not to the Saper Inca himself, but to a new character in our story. This is the Quipucamayok, the keeper of the knots. The glamorous illusion paints this figure as a sage, a wise man with a mystical connection to the strings. You imagine him as an elder, his face a mask of serene concentration, running his sensitive fingers over the knots as if reading Braille. He closes his eyes and the data flows into him, visions of harvests, armies and births. He is a historian, a poet, and a prophet, all in one. He is the keeper of the empire's soul, translating the silent, knotted language for his divine master. Now, let's meet a real Quipucamayok. He is not a mystical sage, he is an accountant. A high-stakes, imperial accountant. He is likely a nobleman, chosen for his intelligence and, most importantly, his loyalty. He comes from a long line of Quipucamayoks, trained from childhood in this complex and unforgiving art. His mind is not filled with poetry. It is a razor-sharp calculator, a living database. He doesn't read the quipu in a spiritual sense, he audits it. He holds the greasy main cord, his fingers flying over the knotted strings, his lips moving silently, counting, calculating, cross-referencing. The shocking reality of the quipu is that it was a system built on redundancy and verification, designed to be tamper-proof. This wasn't a single, poetic message. It was a data set. And the first thing the Quipucamayok in Cusco does is check it against other quipus. Remember the chewed coca leaves and the rotting grass bridges? The empire knew its communication line was fraught with peril. A Chasque could fall. A quipu could be lost in a river, or get soaked in a storm, its coloured dyes running together. So, important information was never sent just once. It was sent in triplicate, via different routes, with different runners. One quipu might travel the high mountain road, another the coastal path. The Quipucamayok's job is to compare the incoming data. He lays out 2 or 3 of these knotted, greasy files side by side. Does the potato count from the northern province match on all 3? Does the number of dead soldiers? If there's a discrepancy, a knot in the wrong place, a string of the wrong colour, it's an immediate red flag. It could be a simple mistake, a runner's misremembered, oral supplement to the data. Or it could be something far more sinister, a provincial governor trying to hide a crop failure, a military commander trying to cover up his losses, or even an enemy trying to feed the empire false information. The quipu was the Inca's defense against fake news, and the tactile, gross nature of the quipu was part of its security. Remember the grime, the specific smell. A Quipucamayok might be able to tell by the feel and scent of the lanolin and dirt if a quipu was a forgery. This doesn't feel like it came from the coast, he might think. The dust is wrong. The system was visceral. The knots themselves were tied in specific ways. A knot for 100 from the southern province might be tied with a slightly different twist than one from the northern province, a subtle tell that only a trained expert would recognize. The why behind this intense, almost paranoid system of accounting was the nature of the Inca Empire itself. It was a command economy, centrally planned from Cusco. The Saper Inca needed to know exactly how much food, labor, and material was available in every corner of his vast territory to effectively move resources, plan military campaigns, and distribute aid in times of famine. The empire's survival depended on accurate data. A lie on a quipu was not just a clerical error, it was an act of treason. The state's response to such a deception would be swift and brutal. So, the Quipucamayok is not a dreamer, he is a forensic auditor. He is the human firewall. His job is to sniff out lies encoded in coloured string and knotted wool. It is only after this rigorous process of verification that the final, audited data would be read to the Saper Inca, that the quipu only carried numbers. It was a spreadsheet. It couldn't carry commands or supplies. That required a different system entirely, a much slower, heavier system. Now, at last, it is time to witness the real Llama Express. We have followed the journey of pure, information the light, swift, data-rich quipu. We have established that a lone human runner, the Chasque, was the express messenger, and that a single, mail-carrying llama is a charming myth. So where does that leave our iconic, spitting camelid? Now, finally, we get to see the real Llama Express, and the glamorous illusion is one of imperial majesty. You imagine a grand caravan, a river of pristine white llamas flowing along the Capacan. They are led by noblemen in fine attire, and the llamas themselves are decorated with colourful tassels and silver bells that jingle musically in the thin mountain air. They carry the emperor's will, perhaps bolts of fine cloth for a loyal governor or golden idols for a new temple. It's a vision of stately, organised, and beautiful commerce. Now, stand by the side of the royal road and watch the real caravan approach. The first thing you notice is the sound. It is not a gentle jingling. It is a chaotic symphony of grunts, bleats, and these incessant, phlegmy coughing and hawking of the llamas as they clear their throats for a potential spit. The second thing you notice is the scale. This isn't a neat little line of 10 or 20 animals. It's a sprawling, disorganized mob of hundreds, sometimes thousands, of llamas. They are not pristine white. They are a dusty, motley collection of brown, black, grey and spotted animals, each laden with bulky, lumpy sacks. This is the shocking reality. The Inca llama caravan was a slow, smelly, chaotic, and incredibly loud affair. The drivers are not noblemen in fine textiles. They are herders, tough, weathered men and women, walking alongside the train, carrying long sticks which they use to whack the hindquarters of stubborn animals. They shout, they whistle, they curse at the llamas, trying to keep the massive herd moving forward and to stop animals from wandering off the path to nibble at a tempting clump of grass. The whole procession kicks up a giant cloud of dust that hangs in the air, mingling with the powerful, pervasive odour of llama dung and the animals' sour breath. Remember the state of the Capacan, that narrow path often covered in droppings. This is why. This caravan is a moving source of pollution. The road is not just their path, it's their toilet. The animals relieve themselves as they walk, creating the very landscape the poor chasquai has to run through. This isn't the stately procession of a king's treasures, it's the ancient equivalent of a fleet of dirty, noisy, diesel trucks rumbling down a country lane. It's slow. A llama caravan moves at a walking pace, maybe 10 to 15 miles on a good day. Compared to the chasquai relay, which could cover 150 miles in the same time, this is glacially slow. So what was the why of this lumbering, inefficient-seeming system? Utility, once again. The Inca state understood the difference between information and material. Information needed to be light and fast. Goods needed to be moved in bulk. The llama was the only animal capable of doing it. This slow, chaotic caravan was the logistical backbone of the entire empire. It was the system that moved the surplus potatoes from one province to another to prevent famine. It was how the stone for temples was brought from the quarry. It was how the army was supplied on the march. Its slowness was a trade-off for its immense capacity. The lack of ornamentation and majesty was also purely practical. Tassels and bells don't help a llama carry more weight, and they might snag on a thorny bush. The herders were not there for show, they were there to do a difficult, thankless job. Their relationship with the animals was not one of companionship, but of constant, low-level conflict, a battle of wills between a tired person and a stubborn, spitting beast of burden. This was the empire's circulatory system, pumping not data, but the real, physical stuff of life through its arteries. It wasn't glamorous, but it was essential. Without this slow, smelly, noisy parade, the swift message of the chasquai would be meaningless. A quip reporting a famine is useless if you can't then ship thousands of tons of potatoes to fix the problem. So, what exactly was in those lumpy, utilitarian sacks? The great llama caravan rumbles past you, a dusty, noisy, smelly river of logistical might. As it moves, you get a closer look at the cargo it carries. The glamorous illusion suggests that these imperial caravans must be transporting the treasures of the empire. You imagine the lumpy sacks are filled with the things we associate with the Inca, dazzling gold artifacts, bars of polished silver and sacks of sparkling, uncut emeralds. Perhaps they carry the Sapa, Inca's divine wardrobe of those exquisite textiles woven from hummingbird feathers, or maybe sacred objects destined for a faraway temple. The cargo, in our minds, is as exotic and precious as the empire itself. It's the stuff of legends, the loot that would later drive the Spanish conquistadors mad with greed. Now, one of the llamas stumbles, and a sack tears open on a sharp rock. The contents spill out onto the grimy path. You lean in, expecting to see the gleam of metal or the sparkle of gems. But the shocking reality is far more mundane. What rolls out into the dust is not gold, but potatoes. Dozens of them. Small, gnarled, multicolored potatoes in shades of purple, red, and yellow. Another sack might contain quinoa, the tiny, bead-like grain. Another is full of chew-freeze-dried potatoes that look like chalky, greyish lumps of styrofoam. Still another is filled with dried fish from the coast, its salty, pungent smell now mixing with the ever-present aroma of llama. The vast majority of the cargo being moved by this mighty imperial transport system was, simply, food. The Inca Empire was not run on gold. It was run on calories. Gold sweat of the sun and silver tears of the moon had immense religious and symbolic value, but you couldn't eat them. They were used for the adornment of the gods and their representative, the Sapa Inca, not as currency. There was no money in the Inca world. The entire economy was based on labor and redistribution. The real wealth of the empire was its ability to feed its people and its armies. The why behind this potato-based economy is rooted in the harsh reality of the Andes. This is a difficult place to live. The growing seasons are short, the weather is unpredictable, and different crops grow at different altitudes. The coastal plains produce fish and cotton. The lower valleys produce maize and beans. The high plains produce potatoes and quinoa. No single region was self-sufficient. The genius of the Inca state was creating a system to move these staples around on a massive scale. The llama caravan was the key. It would haul a surplus of potatoes from a high-altitude province down to a garrison in a maize-growing valley, and on the return trip, it would carry maize back up into the highlands. This redistribution system was the Sapa Inca's primary source of power. He didn't rule through money, he ruled by controlling the food supply. Loyalty was ensured because the state, and only the state, could guarantee that you wouldn't starve if your local potato crop failed. The massive storehouses, or kulkas, built along the Krapakan were not filled with treasure, they were filled with chew, dried meat, and grain. Some of these storehouses were so vast they could feed a city for years. The contents of those dusty sacks were far more valuable to the Sapa Inca than all the gold in his palace. The gold was for the gods, the potatoes were for the people. And keeping the people fed was how you kept the empire stable. So, the Llama Express was not a treasure train. It was a grocery delivery service on an epic scale. The most common sight on the royal road was not a glint of gold, but the humble, lumpy, life-giving potato. This focus on subsistence, on the practical realities of survival, created a vision of a society in perfect, serene balance with its environment. A place where everyone was fed, everyone had a purpose, and life was hard, but harmonious. But even this image of serene stability has its own dark and breathless underside. We have seen the system in its component parts, the runner, the road, the message, the caravan, the cargo. Putting it all together paints a picture of a civilization in perfect tune with its environment. This is the glamorous illusion of the Inca world, a society living in serene, harmonious balance. You imagine a peaceful, ordered existence where everyone has a role, from the Sapa Inca in his golden court to the farmer tending his terraced fields. The state provides food and security. The people provide labor. There is no crime, no poverty, no hunger. It's a vision of a perfectly adapted society, breathing the thin, pure air of the Andes, their lives governed by the predictable rhythms of the seasons and the benevolent will of a god-king. A mountain utopia. Now, let's look closer at the source of that harmony, the thin air itself. The shocking reality is that this peaceful, high-altitude existence came at a strange and brutal biological price. The people of the Andes, including the Inca, are genetically adapted to living at altitudes that would make a person from sea level seriously ill. Their bodies produce more red blood cells to carry oxygen. They have larger lung capacities. They are biological marvels. But this adaptation created a unique and deadly vulnerability. Recent archaeological studies of Inca mummies, particularly the incredibly well-preserved bodies of children sacrificed on mountaintops, have revealed a hidden epidemic. Their lungs are often blackened and scarred, not just from wood smoke in their homes, but from chronic, recurring, and often fatal respiratory infections. The very air that gave them life was also a constant threat. The combination of high altitude, cold, and dry air creates a perfect environment for bacteria like pneumonia to thrive. The Inca, for all their social engineering and architectural genius, had no concept of germ theory. They had no antibiotics. A simple chest cold, which we would treat with a week of pills, could easily curse an Inca child or adult, leading to a prolonged, painful, and often deadly lung infection. The peace of the Andes was punctuated by the constant sound of coughing, of people struggling for breath in an atmosphere that already held so little of it. The harmonious balance was a tightrope walk over a chasm of endemic disease. Furthermore, their very adaptation was a kind of trap. An Inca Highlander, so perfectly suited to his mountain home, would struggle if he had to descend to the hot, humid, sea-level coast for a military campaign. He would be vulnerable to a whole new set of diseases and find the thick, heavy air oppressive and difficult to breathe. The very thing that made him strong at home made him weak abroad. So why do we imagine this utopia? The why is partly due to the Inca's own propaganda. The state-controlled narrative, passed down through oral tradition and encoded in the statistics of the quipus, was one of order and perfection. The Sapa Inca brought order to a chaotic world. But the deeper reason is our own romantic desire to see in the past a simpler, more natural way of life. We project our own anxieties about the modern world or pollution, our stress, our disconnection onto the Inca, imagining them to have had the solution. The reality is that their lives were a constant negotiation with a beautiful but unforgiving environment. Their harmony was not a given. It was earned through immense hardship, social control, and a biological roll of the dice. Their peace was not the absence of struggle, but the successful management of it. The empire was not a gentle, serene utopia. It was a well-oiled survival machine. And the communication system of the Chasquis was one of its most critical components, a system that relied on one final, surprising, and very loud piece of technology to function. We return to our heroic Chasquai, nearing the end of his leg of the relay. He has the greasy, data-filled quipu in his hand. He is approaching the next Chasquazi, that small stone hut where his replacement is waiting. The glamorous illusion of this moment is one of silence and efficiency. You picture a seamless, almost telepathic exchange. The incoming runner, still at a trot, simply hands the quipu to the fresh runner, who is already in motion. Maybe they exchange a silent, knowing nod. It's a moment of perfect, athletic grace, a testament to their training and dedication. The precious message is never at rest. The baton pass is flawless, a whisper in the vast Andean silence. Now, let's witness the real handoff. The incoming Chasquai is still a few hundred yards from the Chasquazi. He is exhausted, his lungs burning, his feet screaming in protest. He doesn't save his last bit of energy for a final sprint. Instead, he puts his fingers to his lips and lets out a piercing whistle. Or, even better, he raises a small, ornate object to his mouth. It is a pututu, a trumpet made from a large, polished conch shell. He takes a deep breath and blows. The sound that erupts is not a gentle whisper. It is a deafening, alien blast, a deep, resonant boom that echoes off the surrounding mountains. It's a sound that can travel for miles in the thin, clear air. This is the shocking reality. The silent relay was incredibly loud. The pututu's blast was the signal. It was the ancient equivalent of a siren or a ringing phone. Inside the cold stone hut, the resting Chasquai hears that sound. It jolts him from his stupor. He knows he has only a few minutes to be ready. He gets up, stretches his stiff legs, and prepares himself mentally and physically for the ordeal to come. The conch shell trumpet was the starting gun. But the sound was only the beginning of the exchange. The quipu itself, as we've established, was a spreadsheet. It was numbers. It recorded what was happening, but not always why. A quipu could tell the central government that 500 llamas had died in a particular province, but it couldn't explain that they had died from a strange new disease. So, as the two runners met, gasping for breath on the side of the Capacan, they didn't just exchange the knotted string. They exchanged words. The incoming runner would deliver a short, memorized oral message to supplement the quipu. 500 llamas dead, he would pant, their tongues have turned black. This oral message was just as important as the physical quipu. It provided the context, the nuance that the numbers couldn't convey, and the fresh runner had to memorize it exactly. His job was not just to run, but to remember. He would repeat the message back to ensure he had it right. 500 dead. Black tongues. Then, and only then, would he turn and begin his own agonizing run to the next station, where he would blast his own poo-choo-choo and pass on both the greasy string and the vital, whispered words. The why behind this system is a brilliant blend of the permanent and the ephemeral. The Inca knew the quipu was a powerful tool for recording hard data, but they also understood its limitations. Human speech could convey subtlety and urgency in a way the knots could not. By pairing the two, they created a system that was both statistically rigorous and narratively rich. But it was also a system with a built-in vulnerability, human memory. The oral message could be distorted as it passed from runner to runner, like a high-stakes game of telephone. This is why the oral messages were kept brutally short and simple. And it is also why the quipu was the primary source. If the oral message got garbled, the hard data of the knots remained. It was a fail-safe. This entire network of runners, the road, these bridges, the messages was held together not just by imperial decree, but by a powerful sense of community and terrifying consequences. To fail in this duty was unthinkable, not just for the individual, but for his entire family. We've seen the mechanics of the system, the cogs in the great imperial machine, and this leads to a final, glamorous illusion, that of a gentle, cooperative society. We imagine the Inca world as one big, happy family, or elu. The bridges are woven in joyous festivals, the roads are maintained by willing volunteers, and the chaskai runs out of a deep sense of civic pride. It's a vision of community-focused socialism, a society where the concept of the individual is secondary to the well-being of the group. Everyone works together for the common good, motivated by a shared culture and a benevolent belief system. It's an attractive idea, a stark contrast to our modern, individualistic world. Now, let's look at the force that truly bound this community together. Stand again by the krapak, Anne. You are in a small village, watching a team of men performing their mitter labor, repairing a section of the road that was washed out by a landslide. They work hard, in perfect unison, their movements economical and practiced. But look at the official overseeing them. He is not a friendly foreman. He is an imperial administrator, a representative of the Sapa Inca. And he carries a staff of office that is more than just a symbol. The shocking reality is that the Inca's community-focused society was enforced by a system of brutal, unflinching justice. The law was absolute, and the punishments were swift and horrific. For the most serious crimes, things like murder, rebellion, or laziness in performing one's mitter duty, the death penalty was common. But it wasn't a simple, quick execution. A lazy worker who endangered the community by failing to repair a road might be taken to the very spot of his negligence and stoned or beaten to death by the rest of his work crew. His punishment served as a terrifyingly visceral lesson to the others, and the cruelty was inventive. Traitors or officials who failed the Sapa Inca might be executed, and then their skin would be flayed and turned into a drum, to be beaten at festivals as a reminder of the price of failure. Their skulls might be turned into drinking cups. The most feared punishment was to be thrown into the Sankahuesi, the House of Torment. This was a subterranean pit filled with snakes, pumas, scorpions, and other creatures. A prisoner would be thrown in, and if by some miracle he survived for 2 days, he was considered innocent and set free. But few, if any, ever survived. This brutal enforcement was the iron fist inside the velvet glove of community. The joyous festival to weave the bridge was joyous in part because failure to participate would result in severe punishment. The chaskai ran until his feet bled not just out of pride, but out of a deep-seated, rational fear of the consequences of failure. If a chaskai failed, if he lost the quipu or garbled the message, he wasn't just putting himself at risk. The Inca practiced collective punishment. His entire family, and sometimes his entire village, could be held responsible for his failure. They might lose status, be forced to relocate, or worse. The why behind this system is, once again, tied to the Inca's obsession with order. To the Inca mind, a crime was not just an offense against an individual, it was an act of cosmic imbalance. It was a tear in the perfect fabric of the empire. The punishment, therefore, had to be severe enough to restore that balance and to serve as a powerful deterrent. In a society without prisons, long-term incarceration was not practiced. Justice had to be public, memorable, and terrifying. The well-being of the collective was paramount, and the individual who threatened that well-being, through intent or negligence, was a cancer to be violently excised. Harmony was real, but it was a harmony maintained by fear as much as by faith. And this brings us back to our original question, ready for a final answer. So we come to the end of our journey, back to the central question that set us on this path through the high Andes. Did the Inca really use llamas for a postal service? Let's stand one last time by the side of the Capacan and watch the whole system in motion. The glamorous illusion is a beautiful, unified image. You see the heroic Chasquay runner, his stride long and graceful, running in perfect sync with his trusty llama companion. The llama has a colourful bag on its back holding the precious quipu, and together, man and beast are a single, harmonious unit, the llama express in its full glory, carrying the male across the majestic landscape. It is the perfect marriage of human endurance and animal fortitude. Now, be still and listen. First, you hear the chaotic rumble of the real llama caravan, the slow-moving river of food and supplies we witnessed earlier. The hundreds of dusty, grumbling animals are being herded along by shouting drivers, kicking up clouds of dirt and leaving a trail of pebbly dung. They are moving north, carrying freeze-dried chew from the high plains to a regional administrative centre. They are the Empire's freight service, slow, loud, smelly, and absolutely vital. The herders are focused on their task, whacking a straying animal back into line, their faces etched with the fatigue of a long, slow journey. They are the arteries of the Empire, pumping its lifeblood of calories. Then, from the north, coming towards you, you hear it. The blast of a Puchutu conch shell, a deep whoomp that echoes from the next ridge. A few minutes later, a figure appears, moving at an impossible speed. It is a Chaswa. He is not running gracefully. He is a picture of controlled agony, his breathing a harsh rasp in the thin air, a wad of coca and lime bulging in his cheek. He carries nothing but the small, greasy quipu in his hand and a small bag at his waist. He is heading south, carrying an urgent message for Cusco census update, a report on a local rebellion, a piece of vital data. He is the Empire's nervous system, transmitting information at the speed of human suffering. This is the shocking, final reality. The two systems meet. The lone, swift runner approaches the slow, sprawling caravan, and they pass each other as if in different worlds. The Chasquay does not greet the herders. The herders do not offer the runner a drink. The runner deftly dodges a pile of fresh llama dung and weaves through a gap in the noisy, chaotic herd without breaking stride. He is focused only on the path ahead, on the next Chasquaysi, on the sound of his own tortured breath. The herders are focused only on their stubborn, cantankerous livestock. They occupy the same road, but they are on entirely different missions, operating on entirely different timetables. One is a whisper. These other a slow roar. And here is the final, simple answer. The why that clarifies everything. No, the Inca did not use llamas for a postal service. It would have made no sense. Why would their ruthlessly practical, efficiency-obsessed state use a slow, stubborn cargo animal that can carry 75 pounds to transport a knotted bundle of string that weighs less than one? It would be like using a cargo ship to deliver a single text message. The Inca had a postal service. It was run by the Chasquis. It was a system of human runners that was faster, more agile, and more secure for carrying lightweight, vital information. The Inca also had a llama express. It was the vast network of caravans that moved the heavy, bulky goods of food, the stone, the textiles that kept the empire alive. They were two separate systems, each perfectly engineered for its specific task. The myth of the llama postal service comes from a simple, romantic misunderstanding, a conflation of these two, incredible but distinct, achievements. The harmony was not in the partnership of a man and a llama delivering a letter. The brutal, perfect harmony was in the way the swift message of the Chasquay and the slow cargo of the llama worked together as separate parts of a single, astonishingly complex imperial machine. And with that final, clear picture, the noise of the road begins to fade. The shouting of the herders and the panting of the runner recede, leaving only the sound of the high mountain wind. The story is complete.